Good evening, my renegades. Welcome back to Rogue Radio. My name is Sarah Jane, and I gotta tell you something. I know it's been a while. Sometimes your fearless rogue leader of the renegades of Rogue Radio decides to disappear every once in a while. One of the reasons is, life. There's a lot of life things that I had to take care of. Also, apparently, for some reason, Spotify for podcasters decided to be really stupid and go ahead and take away the whole recording feature off of their app. So now it's just a storage app for your episodes and your statistics and all of that. There's no recording. I guess they decided to partner with somebody else in order to get those recordings done. So I'm starting to use Podcastle AI. I know a lot of people have problems with AI, but listen, AI kind of helps me cut corners sometimes. So excuse me if you have a problem with AI. It's just right now it's the easiest bet at the moment. So sorry. Another thing is, emotionally and mentally, sometimes, you gotta take a break from things, especially stuff like this. I wish I was as consistent as I am with everything else. I do have to treat my podcast as a second job, or else people won't be interested. And I'm trying to also get into the mindset of that this isn't just a hobby for me. This is something that I actually want to keep doing until it grows into something bigger, and then I'll figure out a way to tackle that giant. So right now, Sarah Jane is just recording from her Chromebook laptop on an AI-powered website. So, if you didn't know the lengths that I have to go to in order to get out an episode, there you go. So, without further ado, let us get into episode 3 of Quiet on Set today on the P3DO-Files. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to click the links down in the description below on my Spotify, my YouTube channel, that's mainly where I'm at, and also go ahead and visit the merch store. I also have an art merch store. I have an art brand called Surrey Draw Me, and if you want to go ahead and visit that, I will put my art shop also down in the description below. If you just want a shirt with Charlie Chaplin on it. I mean, I like Charlie Chaplin. I painted Charlie Chaplin. Anyway, so I wrote a script, so we're just gonna read from that. Welcome back, Renegades, and yes, it is yet another episode of the P3DO-Files. I know it's been a long road already, and I dropped I can't even read. I dropped a pretty hard bomb on you guys on the last episode of this series, and I figured I should get it all over with, because that last episode I did really drained me. So here we are. We're gonna clean out the trenches, clear out the swamp, and get this over with. Those who are easily triggered, it is okay if you don't have to listen. I don't want to hurt your feelings, and you won't hurt my feelings. I won't trigger you if you turn it off, because we're going to be talking about sexual assault or SA, pedophilia, all of those things that I cannot say because YouTube will demonetize me. But I say them anyways because fuck censorship. Anyways, we left off with me revealing Drake Bell as the victim of Brian Peck. Despite my opinion of Drake Bell, I am going to have to be a little bit more unbiased here and really just relay the information as clear as possible for my listeners. If you guys do not know, Drake Bell was accused of grooming in 2017 and served his time doing community service and pled guilty in 2021. I know there is another case he was proven innocent of, but just know that even though I do not like Drake Bell, I still want to hear him out on his account of what happened with Brian Peck. I'm trying not to be so much of a savage, because apparently that's unlikable for people to listen. So I'm not going to rip people at the throat anymore. I'm going to hear them out before I do that. Anyway, that is for my listeners, and so that I can get the best information I can give them. It's mostly for you guys. I want to be able to have the clearest information I can. And if I get it wrong, I get it wrong. I'm not here to apologize. I am just here to make sure that I have the best information for you guys. And if it ends up being false, please correct me. I'm okay with being told I'm wrong. I'm okay with being taught, okay? I'm okay with being taught. You guys can tell me anything. If I said it wrong, if I did it wrong, let me know, okay? Because I'm still learning. I'm not an expert. Like I said, I'm recording from a Chromebook, okay? I have nothing professional. This is me. But before I get into the story, I want to show the viewers that even though there are some actors that have not showed up on the documentary, but they have spoken up about their reaction of the documentary. So Josh Peck, no relation to Brian Peck, has watched a documentary and spoken up saying, I finished the Quiet on Set documentary and took a few days to process it. I reached out to Drake privately, but I want to give my support to the survivors who were brave enough to share their stories of emotional and physical abuse on Nickelodeon sets with the world. Okay. Children should be protected. Reliving this publicly is incredibly difficult, but I hope it can be, I hope it can bring healing for the victims and their families, as well as necessary change to our industry. Jack Salvatore Jr., who played Del Figolo in Zoe 101, and was production assistant to shows of Victorious and Sam and Cat, took to an Insta story saying, we could talk about the messages, we could talk about the fact that we would literally count this gold coin collection in front of his crew, who was living from paycheck to paycheck. He's shared. I guess he's talking about. I'm assuming he's talking about Dan Schneider. We could talk about we could talk about how sometimes he would bring out his shotgun to scare one of the writers when they were working at his house. What the heck? Oh no. We could talk about the high-level conversations I wasn't supposed to hear on how Nickelodeon didn't want to recommend antidepressants to Jeanette McCurdy after her mom died, in fear that she might kill herself and make the network look bad. What the? Listen, I still have to read the book I'm Glad My Mom Died. I think that's the title of her book. It's something, some variation of that. I need to buy that book because Jeanette McCurdy went through some shit. She went through a lot, and she accounted all of it in that book, or as much as she was able to, and as much as she, felt that she needed to. But Nancy Sullivan, who plays Drake's mom on Drake and Josh, says, they weren't my real kids, but I'll always love them. It broke my heart into a million pieces to hear just how much Drake was holding inside while we were working together. I was both devastated and proud seeing the man he's grown into sit down on camera and bravely tell his truth. Daniela Monet from Victorious says, do I wish certain things like... Do I wish certain things like that didn't have to be sexualized? She told Insider in August of 2022, yeah, 100%. A report was made claiming that Dan encouraged actors to wear skimpier clothing and whatever was most revealing. Daniela Monet reported or supported the statement, saying that she definitely wore not age-appropriate clothing. Matthew Underwood from Zoe 101. I cannot speak. Zoe 101. When I was 19, I was sexually harassed and assaulted by my agent at the time, who had spent a decent amount of time building trust with me as a friend and mentor. Again, my trust was betrayed and my self-image was crushed. He wrote on March 29th of 2024. There are many other actors and actresses that have spoken out about their own experiences, but because of time, I'll just get into the episode. On January of 2004, Dan launches his new next big show, Drake and Josh, and this show would establish the next generation of Nickelodeon stars. Drake Bell became a multi-talented singer-songwriter and actor, and he was the actor that unfortunately fell victim to Brian Peck. The cast of All That was still in shock that Brian Peck would no longer be working on set with them. Drake Bell recalls loving old movies and making people laugh early in his young age. He started acting when he was 5 years of age, and his parents were going through a divorce at the time, and his dad wanted to find something that he could do with his son. His father was looking through a magazine and he found an ad for Hollywood Connection, and he thought that this was right up Drake's alley. He had started to taking Drake to auditions. He would get up at he would get picked up at 3:30 to go out to audition and wouldn't come home till 10 or 11 at night. That was his routine. Like after school, Dad would pick him up at 3:30 and go to auditions over and over again. That was the routine. That was the repeating routine for the father and son, and Drake loved every minute of it. The main goal was to get on a TV show and be a part of that show regularly. Then an audition came up for the Amanda Show. And after his audition, Dan Schneider comes out and says that Amanda wants him on the show. And that's when he ends up becoming a regular on the show. Let's see here. He did enjoy the set overall vibe and the atmosphere. He finally got to do what he loved doing. He enjoyed his sketches like Totally Kyle. Dan would always be involved on set, giving everyone pointers on how to make things funnier. In 1999, Nickelodeon on Sunset is where they had met Brian Peck, who worked as a dialogue coach on The Amanda Show. Drake met him on the first day at the table read, and he got along with everyone, and everyone got along with him. Brian knew about his love for old Hollywood, and he would always talk to him and bond with him over that. His father was told that he was a good coach and that he could help Drake get more jobs. Brian even tried coaxing his father into letting Drake stay at his home to help him out with lessons So he used him as an excuse to get away with what he wanted to do with him, and that'll come later. There would be times in the dressing room that he would come in and touch Drake in certain ways that just felt off to his father, helping him put on things in the dressing room, have his arm around his waist while rehearsing lines. And Drake's father had enough and ended up going to the production and told him that he was uncomfortable with him touching his son like that, and him just being overall just being around Drake and being touchy-feely. And the production said that, oh, he's gay, and maybe you're just homophobic, and he's just touchy-feely. That's just who he is. That's his personality. Listen, my opinion don't mean anything. Okay, you can listen to this and you can take my opinion if you want to. It's fine. Okay, I have met homosexuals before. Some of them aren't touchy-feely. Some of them are. It doesn't mean that they're perverts. But I will say, if the homosexual ends up starting to touch kids, they're not a homosexual. They are a pedophile. Okay? That's all I'm going to say. They're a pedophile, and you know how much I hate pedophiles. We're just going to leave it at that. But his father had been ostracized when it came to him exposing the behavior of Brian Peck, and so he backed off. When Drake and Josh started being thought up, Dan took Drake out to eat and pitched the idea to him. He and his dad were so excited for the opportunity, and they accepted the job. Unfortunately, when Brian had started to prey upon Drake even more and wanted to be Drake's manager, and his father did not like the idea and voiced his opinion about it. Brian had told him that parents should never be their kids' managers. See, that should have been a red flag from the beginning, and I don't think that Drake's father had any problem with seeing the red flags. I'm saying to anybody else, that should have been a red flag. Because, I mean, I'm not a parent yet. One of these days I will be, and I will be a badass mom, because I will tear people at the throat if they come at my kids. That's just me. I'm overprotective of all of the children in my family. I just know that would never happen with me, but the red flags were there. And people on set have decided to just refuse just to look over it. But Brian had told him that parents should never be their kids' managers. Okay, I got that. Brian would show up at Drake's concerts, and it became excessive with Brian. Dan would come to a few shows if it was close, but Brian went out of his way to see Drake. And he most likely had the idea of getting him alone as well. So, at the time, that was totally normal to Drake, as young as he was, but now looking back, he realized that this behavior was strange, to say the least. Drake's dad set up a concert at the Strawberry Festival one year, and Brian showed up to that too, following him all over the festival, stalking him. Good God. There was a birthday party for Drake, and Brian chimed in and said that he wanted it at his house, and of course his father said no to that. In 2001, Brian suggested that Drake could come to his house and he could perform, and all his friends from production could be there, and it made it easy. When his father had gotten his presents out of the car, so apparently Brian Peck did get away with this, where he threw a party at his house for Drake, because around this time, his father had gotten presents out of the car and had seen a bag of cards with from Brian's friends, and inside were messages of adult themes inside. Drake didn't even know that he had those either, and it was at this point the situation with Brian had been building up, and Drake's dad had started being much more protective over Drake and made it harder and harder for Brian to be alone with Drake. Brian started to try and drive a wedge between him and his dad, and he was lying and saying that he was stealing Drake's money and that no one likes him on set. And with Drake being so young and impressionable at the time, he did believe what Brian said and started to hang out with Brian more than his own father. He started feeling guilty about the fact that he had his dad as his manager, and what Brian was saying he believed because he was in the industry for so long and he knew what he was talking about. Brian had even found an attorney and even got into his mom's ear to drive a wedge even further. Drake's dad had received a call from his mom saying that he didn't want him to be his manager anymore. So Drake didn't want his father to be his manager anymore at this time. And so he basically said he said, I want what my son wants. And even though it broke his heart, he let his mom take over, and she was the manager. But he warned her about Brian and said, do not let Brian be alone with Drake. Brian had tricked her and started to stay the night at Brian's home. Drake started staying the night at Brian's home to work on lines because it was more convenient for his mother since it was an hour drive there and back. Drake was sleeping on the couch like he usually does, and he woke up to him being sexually assaulted. Let's see here. He froze and didn't know what to do or how to react to the situation. He didn't know how to get out of it. He couldn't run anywhere since he's an hour away from home. And he was 15 at the time. He couldn't say that he didn't want to go to Brian's house because that would raise questions. Brian knew how to manipulate anyone around him to his will, and he knew what to say in order to get away with Drake, and Drake fell. Drake felt trapped. So I want to say this really quick. I know that there is a stigma about men being so violent and hard, and everything in this culture we live in is always the man's fault. Men get victimized too, and it's most of the time they hold it in because they have this view of themselves of being the man and handling it. That instinct alone is written in a man's DNA, and that's just how men are. Men feel much more shame than anyone because they have an unspoken responsibility to themselves and to the people that they love. So when they are victimized in this way, most likely they will bottle it up and take it to the grave and never say anything. People would look at me less of a man because I didn't defend myself. This is what he says. People will think that I'm gay because I let it happen. How can I face my family if I tell them what happened? We always talk about the victimization of women, and we never flip the coin and try to see how hard men have it when they are victimized in this way. And we don't give them any grace to heal from their trauma. People react to trauma in many different ways, so I believe that men have been put in a box when it comes to this topic, and it's honestly shameful that we don't talk about it more because men have committed suicide over things like this, and it's shameful. We only look at one gender instead of both as a victim of stuff like this. Men are 4 times more likely to contemplate suicide when sexually victimized, 26 more times to engage in drugs, 13 times to abuse, 13 times more likely to abuse alcohol, 6 more times likely to suffer from PTSD, and 3 times more likely to suffer from depression. 9% of rape victims are male. There should be a safe place for men as well as women when it comes to this type of situation. Most of the guests that come to the center that I work at are men, and that should speak volumes. The situation with Brian Peck had gotten worse over time, and the abuse was extensive and brutal. He felt uncomfortable talking about it in the documentary, and he did say, imagine the worst thing to happen in sexual assault, and that will answer your questions. He still wonders how he survived such an ordeal. He did experience a lot of good things in his career, and it blurred into comparison to what he was feeling on the inside. He believed no one knew that this was a big secret and hoped that it would stop. He had gotten a girlfriend, as he got older, and he was staying at his girlfriend's house all of the time because he just felt safe there. He said to his girlfriend's mom, it took her, I'm sorry. He said that his girlfriend's mom at the time, it took her 6 seconds to figure out what had been going on with him. One day, he was at his girlfriend's house, and Brian had planned on taking him to Disneyland like he always would, and Drake didn't want to go. Brian blew up his phone, and he kept ignoring it. Then he started to call his girlfriend's house nonstop, which is weird, period. Just weird. Finally, her mom answered and handed it to Drake, and Brian wondered what was going on because they had plans. Drake decided to stay there at his girlfriend's home, and that night, instead of being with Brian. Brian got very angry and he hung up the phone, and Brian continued to keep calling. The girlfriend's mom pulled him aside and wanted to know what was going on. He tried playing it off, but her mom had seen through his facade. She said, a 40-year-old man doesn't call my daughter's boyfriend like that. She took matters into her own hands and called his mother, saying he is being taken to see her therapist the next day because something is going on that they needed to figure out, and it seems like he is in deep danger. Let's see, he had seen the therapist and was too scared to talk about what had happened to him. In 2003, they had to reshoot the pilot for Drake and Josh, and Brian was trying to convince Drake to convince Dan to get him to be the dad of the show. Creepy! That's disgusting. Why am I laughing? This is not funny. It's just astounding. I think I'm just laughing out of shock. Just how disgusting people can be. It's just, bleh. I want to gag. Drake didn't want him to be anywhere near the show. One day he was on the phone with his mom and he exploded. So this was the tipping point. This is where Drake had ended up confessing everything to his mom. He told her everything, and she called the police, and then they were sitting in the dining room with a few detectives being asked what happened. The investigation was thorough, and he had to be detailed with every situation to people who he didn't know. He had to call Brian and get him to admit that he had victimized him. He called a few times before he finally answered and told Brian that he was having a difficult time with what he had done and asked why it even happened. Brian started a full-on confession, and he asked over and over during the conversation if the conversation was being recorded. He was feeling relieved that the situation had been taken care of, but also worried about the show as well. He started losing hair because of the stress, and Brian had gotten arrested with charges of lewd and I cannot pronounce this, lascivious acts with a child of 14 and 15 years old, sodomy, forcible penetration using a foreign object without consent, using threats, employment of a child for pornography, oral copulation of a minor under 16, oral copulation by anesthesia or controlled substance, sending harmful matter, and using a minor for sex acts. So that I actually had to pause and read the documents that were shown on the screen in order to get that, because Drake did not want to go into any detail. But if you do read the documents that flash upon the screen and you pause it, it's there. Dan had called Drake and asked if this had anything to do with him, the whole Brian Peck thing, because it ended up becoming a news segment. It was a big thing on the news at the time, and Dan wanted to make sure that Drake wasn't a victim. And when he found out that he was a victim, he just goes, "Okay, that's all I wanted to know." He said that he was so glad that he didn't get his hands on Drake. Hang on. And Dad said, his dad gets a call from Drake and told him that Brian had been arrested for molestation. He said that he was so glad that he didn't get his hands on Drake, and Drake didn't tell him right away about it. So at this time, his father didn't know what was going on. I think Drake wanted time to tell his father what was going on. So his father says that he had never been the same since once he found out that, and doesn't wish this on any parent. It took a while for him to get to court, but when he did, he was hoping that Brian would be in jail for a while and never work with kids ever again. He had only gotten 16 months in jail, and he went back to being a dialogue coach. They went to the courtroom, and the entire side of the courtroom on Brian Peck's side was full of supporters. Drake looked at all of Brian's support and said, "How dare you? You will never have the memory of you will forever have the memory of sitting in this courtroom defending this person. And I will forever have the memory of the person you're defending violating me and doing unspeakable acts and crimes, and that's what I'll remember." Brian pleads to no contest to 2 counts of child sex abuse, sentenced to 16 months in jail, and ordered to register as a sex offender. Quiet on Set did a very brave thing and petitioned the court to unseal the letters of support in the case. Some were friends and family. Nickelodeon and Dan doesn't write letters, but these people did. So I'm going to go ahead and read these names. James Marsden, Taryn Killam, Ellen Thicke, Thomas DeSanto, Ron Melendez, Ryder Strong, and Will Friedel. Ryder Strong and Will Friedel are from Boy Meets World. Sean and Eric from Boy Meets World, which kind of broke my heart at the time, but Quiet on Set actually kind of highlighted this part and said these are some of the people who had supported Brian in this case. And usually, okay, I'm the first person to send people to the guillotine when it comes to this situation. But the makers of the documentary make a good point that we do not know what these people were told by Brian in order for them to give them their support, or give him their support. And that makes perfect sense. So before I go and demonize any of these people, they may actually regret doing this now. We also don't know who was exactly in the courtroom for Brian's sentencing either. There are some letters that use the same language going against Drake, saying that Brian would have never done this unless he was tempted. That's a dumbass excuse. That goes without saying, of course. The man is an adult, okay? Brian Peck is an adult, okay? At the time, Drake was 15 when this started happening. So, I'm sorry. I understand that kids are expected to grow up very quickly in show business. I understand that. But that doesn't mean that they are truly adults. And that does not give any excuse to any asshole who decides to victimize a child. At the end of the day, without any titles, director, dialogue coach, actor, actress, set performer, whatever the fuck you are, strip down the titles and there's always a kid and an adult. And the adult will always be at fault. That's it. I'm done. If an adult victimizes a child, it is not the child's responsibility. It is not the child's responsibility to bear the burden. Oh, the child tempted the adult. The adult is more mature, or should be more mature, in order to handle situations like this and understand that this should not be happening. An adult should never, ever victimize a child. And those who do, you guys are assholes. You're disgusting. There's a special place in hell for you. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I will see you in the trenches next time. Bye-bye.